Empirical formula of a compound is the simplest ratio of atoms in that compound. And the molecular formula is the actual number of atoms of each element within the compound. You can calculate the empirical formula using the masses or percentages of each element within the compound. And if you know the empirical formula, and then the molecular mass of that compound, you can use these two to calculate the molecular formula. So let's first see how can we calculate the empirical formula. There are several steps that we can apply. The first step is to find the moles of each element, and this can be done by simply dividing the mass or percentage mass by the atomic mass of each element. And then we can divide each of the moles by the simple number of moles calculated. So you're going to have different number of moles and you can calculate all the different moles by the smallest number. Make sure that each of the numbers are integers. If not, then you have to multiply by a number that turn all of them into integers. For example, if you found the ratio to be 1 to 1.5, then you need to multiply all these ratios by 2 to get a ratio of 2 to 3. So let's have an example. So calculate the empirical formula of a compound that contains carbon 5.14 grams of carbon, 0.86 grams of hydrogen, and 6.89 grams of oxygen. The first thing we need to do is to find the moles of each element by dividing the masses that we had here by the atomic mass. So the moles of carbon, when we divide 5.14 over 12, which is the atomic mass of carbon, this is 0.428 moles. For hydrogen, divided by 1, which is the atomic mass of hydrogen, 0.86. And then for oxygen, dividing by 16, the mass by 16, it's 0.431. Now, the smallest number of moles is the one for carbon, which is 0.428. So we have to divide all these three by that value. So the carbon ratio here is going to be 1. Hydrogen is going to be almost 2 because when you divide 0.86 over 0.428, it's going to be 2 point something, but it's almost 2. And oxygen also is almost 1. So the ratio now is 1 to 2 to 1. So the empirical formula is C1H2O1. And then calculating the molecular formula. To calculate the molecular formula, you can use the mass of the empirical formula and the molecular mass of the compound. Now you can use this to find how many empirical formula units are there in the molecular formula. So let's have an example. So deduce the molecular formula of a compound which has an empirical formula of C2H4O. So this is the empirical formula and has a molecular mass of 88. First of all, we need to find the mass of the empirical formula. So the mass of the empirical formula is 24, which is for 2 carbons, plus 4, which is 4 hydrogens, plus 16, which is 1 oxygen. So this is a total of 44. And then we know that the molecular mass of the compound is 88. So when you divide 88, which is the MR of the compound, by 44, that will give you 2, which means there are 2 empirical formula units within that compound. So the molecular formula is C4H8O2. So we have to multiply the empirical formula by 2 because there are 2 empirical formula units within the molecular formula.